Hello and welcome to the Young Generation Luncheon, Beating AI with Mozart. So my name is Katharina, I'm your host for this session, and I've got two comments already on the title. It's a Young Generation Luncheon. So on the luncheon, you're already doing the right thing, you're having your lunch in here. There are more people outside who can also join us. I would just ask you to close the door, please. So that we can also concentrate on the session. So just continue eating, maybe make sure not to make such loud noises whilst you're eating. But other than that, enjoy not only the food for your belly, but also the food for thoughts that we're trying to provide for you now, the food for your ears, and maybe even the soul food that we have prepared for you. So yesterday, at the same time, there was a session here. Maybe a few of you were here. I think Bart is also in the room who held the session, and we learned that one of our most important things that we have is presence. So we invite you to now be present and be here with us and actually make the most out of this session. That also means feel free whenever you have a question to just address us and ask your question. And other than that, just try to be here with us now. So we have someone here who will help us now to come into the moment and to really arrive here. And I actually have a very easy job as a moderator because everyone who I'm going to announce today was already announced yesterday, and I think most of you joined the evening dinner, so I don't really have to introduce a lot, but still let me say that's the person who's gonna play a piece of music now for us is a Trevor Flutes artist. And I'm not sure if you know, I just learned that myself, which I love. Every time you moderate, you learn something new. I learned that there's actually a specific recognition for artists that are allowed to play this special Trevor flutes. And she is one of them, and it's actually quite an achievement. She originally comes from Brazil, but she grew up in South Korea and Japan and England, so quite international. And I very much recommend to follow her on all her social media feeds like Instagram and YouTube. It's quite impressive to watch her and listen to her there. She has a very special interest in contemporary music and the work with living composers, but we're now going to start the session with maybe a piece of music that isn't that contemporary. And I invite you to listen, you might even recognize it. So please welcome with me again, Daniela. Thank you so much, Daniela. So, who recognized the piece of music? Who knew it? Hands up? Okay, that's quite a lot. Who knows the composer? Right, just shout it out, please. Mozart. And what's the name of the piece? such well-known people here, you know it all. It's actually quite familiar for myself as well, as I'm from Salzburg. So, you know, we basically grew up with Mozart. I did leave Salzburg, though, as it was a bit too small at a specific point in my life, and I came to Vienna to create my own agency, which works a lot with diversity in Europe and also with connecting. So what are we connecting today? We're connecting the topic of artificial intelligence and classical music, like Mozart. Well, again, I have a very easy job because the person who's going to tell you what those two things actually have to do with each other, you already know him. He was actually already in a pre-program and also yesterday on stage together with Daniela. So he's one of the people who I got to know this year, and I actually can tell you he's one of the most remarkable people I got to know this year. And you know, at conferences, you always say that afterwards, when the speakers step from stage, you should talk to them, and they are still going to be here for a coffee talk. I do recommend you talk to him, because I'm sure that you will get something out of the conversation with him. He's very modest himself, which is why he wouldn't tell you about his career, and I, as a moderator, can do that. So he started his career as an opera singer, and if you hear him speak, you will immediately recognize from his voice why. He was on stage with singers like Bernhard Kerres. He then was a CEO in tech companies like Kapsch. He was also CEO and artistic director of the Concert House in Vienna, and he even had his own startup in Silicon Valley, so I think there's quite some diversity there. These days, he's merged all those different experiences, and on the one hand, he actually uses that knowledge and also that personal and emotional experience to pass it on to others and support others in personal coachings. And also he supports organizations in how to become more innovative with using music. So today, Bernhard is going to talk about both those worlds, the tech and innovation scene, and also the world of music. So I would say, give it up for Bernhard Kerres.
Thank you, Katharina.
Bernhard, I have an initial question to you. Since we now just listened to this beautiful piece of music, à la Drucker, we're talking about artificial intelligence. Do you think artificial intelligence could compose and play a piece like this?
Well, there are actually machines out there who try to do that. Well, it should be easy with music, right? Because what we learn about music and what we learn about artificial intelligence really works well in very set systems. It needs to have a set space and very clear rules. And music is exactly that. It's a basic system of 5 lines. Nevertheless, you can check out for yourself. If you go, and you will see that later on my webpage, I put you there 3 different kinds of à la Drucker. The first one is the interpretation by Andras Schiff, a wonderful classical pianist who really tries to be as close to what he thinks the composer wanted as possible. The second one is actually a recomposed piece by an open AI machine, by MuseNet. That's an MIT project. Listen to it. And the third one then is what another human did with that theme, the Turkish pianist Fazıl Say. And it's fascinating to hear these 3 things in parallel. And we thought about playing it here, but then we thought about time and so on, and we said, rather you go to my webpage and then check it out. But it's really fascinating to see that. So my own opinion is, with music, it doesn't work that well yet. But there are other areas where it's really working well. And in preparation for that talk, my friends from AI Automatica, one of the startups I'm working with, and I have a tiny little stake in it, they gave me a lecture on Monday for the whole day about AI. They said, Bernhard, when you're coming on stage, you just can't only bullshit around about AI. You really need to know the basics. We covered a bit of recap from statistic and a bit of recap of probability calculations. That's how far we got in a whole day. And I tell you, after that day, my head was blown. So what I do with them is actually looking for the business applications of artificial intelligence. And there are many, as I said, as long as there is a well-defined space and there is rules, and what AI is really good at is to find any kind of correlations, connections, and so on. What it cannot do is either to expand that space or to look for causality. So what does that actually mean? One of the fascinating things about AI, you would think, is we hear a lot about all these cameras. We have them here as well, and they can do facial recognition, and they know exactly who we are, and they might even know that you're still a bit hungry and would like to have some dessert. But these things AI should know and probably does know. So there is a huge field in the medical field where any kind of image is really, really important, and that's the whole huge field of radiology. What is fascinating there is, yes, we have all the picture, and they're all now digitalized, right? Whenever you go there, you actually don't get a nice film anymore, or a nice picture, you get a CD-ROM. So you would think applying AI there would be fantastic, because AI should be able to see, you broke your leg at your last skiing trip, and that's compared differently to your prior X-ray. Or it should detect other illnesses or differences. Well, it's not that easy. There's a startup in Munich called Smart Reporting, and they were really smart because they saw and they realized that we do not have standardized data about these kind of X-ray and other pictures. So what they did, they introduced first actually a standardized reporting tool so that the doctor has questions which he needs to answer, and he gets a standardized answer which directly goes into the report. That's the kind of prerequisite for using AI in radiology. And they are now going into AI. No surprises there. But there is a field actually, also in the medical field, in imagery, where AI is pretty good already. And that has to do with breast cancer detection. Breast cancer detection is something which is actually working pretty good, because as soon as you see a mammography, you see different patterns. And if you look at the US, in the US, they established a standard of these patterns, of these gray areas you see on an X-ray, which is based on 5 different levels. This standard was developed in the late 60s, early 70s. What it leads to is, unfortunately, to a lot of false positives, which means that a lot of women for weeks and weeks are scared that they have breast cancer while they don't have it. AI can actually differentiate these gray areas significantly more than any human person could do. So there is AI out there to detect it significantly better. But there's another problem, and that's regulation. FDA hasn't approved that yet, and we wonder when it will approve that. So there's also a question actually about that. And there's another question about it which we addressed in some of the other talks beforehand, is the use of data, even anonymized data. Because for AI in imagery and in radiology to work, we need huge databases of images with actually quite a lot of data there. Not the persons, no personal data, but kind of what illness it is, yeah, when it was detected, which stage, and. If we have that, AI will be absolutely great. But what does it mean for us? If AI would be so great as we all think, and it can do all this imaging and so on, there's an area which is booming in the internet, and it's online dating. Well, I guess many of us who are single, and I don't ask anybody now to say who is single, but they have sometimes a list of criteria what they're looking in different partner. Right, Katharina?
Yeah, right. So I heard.
So you heard. So did you use online dating?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Bernhard. I always wanted to talk about my dating experience in front of an international management audience. Did I mention that we have Chatham House rules? Okay, well, maybe I'm not the one to answer that question, but let's ask the audience. Who has used online dating apps? And if no one's raising their hand, we know you're lying. So, who has used online dating apps? All right, a few. Okay. More interesting question, who still is?
No, we didn't ask that.
Yeah, well, you wanted to know that. Okay, sorry. I still saw 2 hands. I'll show you later.
Yes, I don't believe that quite that way, because if you look at online dating apps and the numbers, I mean, it's amazing how many people have used online dating in their life at some point. But the question is actually, how many meaningful relationships came out of that? And I leave it to you to say what is meaningful, because that means something different to everyone. But if AI was as good as they say, wouldn't we all have meaningful relationships out of online dating? Would make sense, right? Well, unfortunately, at least my experience wasn't that good. So, not for me. But why is that? The interesting thing is that the human connection is significantly more sophisticated than what you can actually put in a 1 or 2-dimensional system. What I mean with that is that AI so far uses visuals and sometimes actually audio. That's just 2 of our 5, or some people would say we have 6 senses, yeah? Not more than that. So we know actually that the connection we have, even in a normal conversation, often depends on not only how we look at each other and what the voice does. I'm very fortunate with my voice. It's a voice where many people like to listen to me, regardless of what I'm saying. I tested that in many board meetings. I once wanted actually to read the weather report instead of the shareholder report. Well, I didn't do that. Yeah. But we see that, and I see actually one of the, for the ones who are still on dating apps, there's a German dating app which uses voice. I always think if I go back to online dating, I'll take that one. I should be very successful there. So we have only these 2 components, these 2 senses, and there is taste, there is smell, there is touch. And these are so important for us as humans. And with all the kind of intellectual input we had over the last couple of days, I urge you not to forget that. I urge you to smell your food. Smell, I don't know, go there wherever you like. Yeah? Listen significantly more carefully about the voices you hear. You detect with people you know very well to see how they actually are. To touch, you know, I love touching paper. Yeah? It's amazing to feel that. Yeah? So play with that. And we thought we'll do a little experiment on that, right?
I think we thought that, yes.
We thought that? Ladies and gentlemen, are you in for a little experiment? So
you shouldn't have any food left in your food at that moment.
So put away your glasses and your cutlery and so on, and make sure that you stand freely around the room. Also put away your food. Caitlin, thank you. Yeah, because you will need it. And just go with the flow. It's an experiment. I don't know what will happen. But experiments are really fun if you do them and if you let go and go into that. So I ask you to trust me and all of us around us. So close your eyes and feel the floor and how you're standing. Feel the energy in the room. And with that energy, breathe in and breathe out. And with the next breath, with the next breath you take, start humming very, very softly. You can start a bit louder and louder and louder. Thank you very much. And now take a minute to turn to your neighbor and to speak about how it actually felt to do that. And talk about your feelings, please, also the man in the room.
Hast du? Ja? Was?
Ich? Sagst du an oder ich? Sagst du an oder ich? Dass wir fragen. Okay. So, Katharina will actually go through, if I can have your attention for back to me, and then actually back to Katharina. We would love if some of you shared their experiences.
How did you feel doing that exercise? Who wants to share? Was that a hand? Do you want to share? Can we get the mic? No? Otherwise I have to stand very close to you. This is how it does.
We felt relaxed. It was like similar feeling as doing mindfulness or meditation, something like that. Thank you.
Okay, we better get the mic, otherwise I'm going to have to do that to everyone. Maybe it's more hands now, I'm not sure, maybe it's less. Don't disappoint me, okay, there.
Is it working? Yes. I think it was very focused and beautiful. I thought it was very funny because you could hear when people were pausing to breathe. But it was also like the trust, and if you begin again, that everyone else is doing it as well, so it was very beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, so I thought it was very cool. They were like, as if the place was vibrating, but it was like micro, little vibration. So I thought it was very relaxing until when I opened my eyes. Yeah, so I thought it was really beautiful.
Did anyone have any negative feelings? Maybe at the beginning, was it awkward? No? Anyone else who wants to share how you felt? Yes.
We talked about how we were disoriented when the flute started. So someone's humming very nicely there. Oh no, it's the flute. So at the beginning it was a little bit like a mystery what was going to happen, right? So, but not negative, I don't think, just more curious.
Thank you.
It's very curious because it looked like the same note. We were in total harmony. And then the flute came on it. How can we, we were in total harmony. I don't know what tune was it. An A, a B, what was it?
F sharp.
F sharp, fa dièse. Thank you. We are F sharp too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm heading back to you, Bernhard. I think that pretty much summed it up, didn't it?
Thank you very much for doing this experiment with us. And to be honest, the basic part of this experiment I do quite often, and what happens is exactly what happened here very quickly, is that you negotiate actually on one note. Yeah? And it's an amazing feeling that here are, I don't know, 70 people, 100 people or so, and without me telling you, without me humming or anything, you agree on one note. And this is something which in itself I find so powerful, because so often, you have people like me talking here and you listen to it a bit and so on. Yeah, but what you do is actually you listen in your subconsciousness, you react in your subconsciousness to others and to your surroundings. And I sometimes, actually today also, I told a story about conductors who come to new orchestras and new teams. And what you see very often is that a young conductor, first of all, comes to the stage a bit nervous and starts actually telling people his inspiration for that piece. What happens is actually that in some of the orchestras, if you sit in the back of the orchestra and play not the flute, but the tuba or something like that, you have a newspaper there and you just think, okay, it's a young conductor again. Yeah. Established conductors do the opposite. They start and they let the orchestra play and they listen and they start actually exactly that interaction we had in this very short experiment here. And thank you very much, Daniela, for improvising on it, because that was new to me too, and I didn't know how that would work. But I could have gone on for at least another 15 minutes or so, because it made me feel so good and so warm. There's one aspect of music, and that's considering AI really important. And that is the aspect of which was discovered by neurologists. I don't know how many of you read, for example, the books of Oliver Sacks. Great books to read, yes, thank you. But there's also the Austrian neurologist and brain scientist Gerald Hütter. And again, really, really good to read. What they have found out is that active music making or listening to music actually rewires your brain. I'm not a scientist, but I've read some of these papers, and they really can show actually in these funny, colorful pictures that your brain activity is completely different when you make music and even after you make music. It changes how you think and how you work. Please. It is significantly more active when you make music, but it also happens when you listen to music. And it mostly happens with classical music and only with some really, really good pop or rock music. The reason behind that is that the complexity of music stimulates your brain activity. Some of the so-called music you listen to on the radio is not stimulating you. I'm sorry. Yeah, it might be nice in the background. Yes? Absolutely. I'm Viennese too, so I was brought up with that. So I was brought up with music making, with listening to music and so on. The only thing is, as both Viennese, shouldn't we be on the intellectual top of the world? Something went wrong here. I don't know what. Well, we'll work on that. So this interaction actually is fascinating. And what we did when I was at the Concerthaus, one of my pet projects was actually to try that out, and I could see it in real life. So we went to schools, to primary schools, and we made music, actually singing, with these kids every single day. Can you imagine to go to a primary school teacher and say, hey, you're teacher, I would like to have your class every single day for 1 hour. And I know your class is not that easy because it has a lot of migration background and you have issues in there. The first reaction is kind of, definitely not. Luckily, we had fantastic teachers and fantastic headmasters who said, let's try it out for 3 months. Normally, after 2 or 3 weeks, any teacher would come back to us and say, please stay. The reason behind that is that when we did singing with these kids every single day, teaching mathematics, English, biology, German, whatever afterwards was so much easier. The kids were really attentive. The kids were eager to learn. They were much calmer. They were also interacting. So it was a fantastic experiment, and that's also why I asked Daniela to start that session, because I hoped you would listen more. And this is actually going on. Supera has expanded to Central and Eastern Europe, and it's just something to take away, saying how much it happens actually there.
Actually, it's been mentioned already in the audience. I'm wondering, what does it mean for us? So can you give us your personal recommendation, like when we have the next difficult presentation coming up? What's the piece of Mozart, or I don't know, that we should listen to boost our brain?
I think we all need to find our own pieces. So what I did before I did this presentation, or started that presentation, I sat outside and listened to Johann Sebastian Bach violin concertos with Gideon Kramer playing. Fantastic. Academy of St. Martin in the Fields, a recording I can really recommend. Yeah, I listened to a lot of Bach music. But when I lived in Silicon Valley, what amazed me even more, you know, I was working in a huge co-working space with a couple of hundred techies and marketing people and in the Twitter building in Silicon Valley or in San Francisco on Market Street. As it is in many of these places, they have their headphones on. So I thought, okay, that's an interesting space. Nobody listens to each other. So I asked them, actually said, kind of, what are you listening to? And they said, I don't know. I said, can I listen in? And I heard Mozart, Schubert, Haydn, Beethoven, and others. I said, wow, do you know what you're listening to? I said, no, but you know, when I listen to that kind of music, my coding is significantly better. My focus is significantly better. So, like you're coming back to your question, even listening to classical music will enhance your concentration, your focus, and what the scientists say, it's not only that, it's your problem-solving skills as well, which I find completely amazing. So it increases your kind of way of how you look at problems, and it allows you to think outside of the box. That's why I love to bring music to any kind of leadership training or innovation or so, because it really changes how we think and how our brain works. And there I think AI will have a big problem to actually come to that. And one last thought on music and what music actually does, and perhaps one before that too, is what I like so much about music and what I think what AI never can do is classical music is what I call a double creativity process. What do I mean by that? As a composer, you have this crazy idea in your head of a full-blown orchestra with 120 people on stage. And if you were Gustav Mahler, you were sitting somewhere in Upper Austria at a beautiful lake, and just the cowbells were ringing. And why not to integrate these cowbells in your symphony, right? And he did. But he did that in a way that he could take all those ideas into the most rigid system you can think of, a system of 5 black lines. Not more than that. 5 black lines. I mean, speak to any of the coders and say, you know, your system is reduced to 5 lines. Have fun. So that's the first act of creativity. The second act of creativity is looking at these scores, and we have one here, looking at these black dots on 5 lines, and actually recreating music out of that. Now, I sometimes make the test and give actually a sheet of music into one of these great sound machines, and there is the Vienna Sound Library. They have all the different sounds of violins and brass and timpani and. Yeah, you put it in and say, yeah, all the notes are there, but it's awfully boring. And as I mentioned Mahler, so there's an old recording, a video recording, it's hard to find, of Leonard Bernstein, one of my favorite conductors, whom I was lucky enough to meet, and that tells you how old I am, working with the Vienna Philharmonic on Mahler. And he stands there and conducts, and Mahler uses a lot of waltzes, right? And he stands there at some point and says, gentlemen, at that time, unfortunately, only gentlemen, I don't understand you. I'm an American Jew, and you are Viennese, and you can't play Viennese waltz? And Viennese waltz is really difficult because no machine can actually play that. Yeah? A machine would play Viennese waltz, it's on 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. For the Viennese around here, have fun dancing to that. The Viennese waltz is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's these tiny little elements which can't actually be written. Now, certainly some of you can say, we can put that all in AI machines. Yes, you can. But the fascinating thing for me is, for example, one of the wonderful statements by Maren Alsop, who is the new female chief conductor, first female chief conductor of a major Austrian orchestra, of the Radio Symphony Orchestra. Go and listen to her. She's great. Maren actually said in one of the videos, she talked to a guy and said, she was asked, what are you conducting tonight? And she says, oh, I'm conducting Beethoven Fifths. Da-da-da-dum. And the guy says, oh, I've heard that so often. And she says, we recreate the performance every single time, and it's different every single time. And when I go and actually teach leadership, I have videos of 5 different conductors conducting these first bars of Beethoven Fifth Symphony, which everybody knows. Yeah? And they're all different, but still they're completely recognizable. So AI has a huge problem if there's more than one solution. If there are actually endless solutions and they depend on something which is out of the space of the 5 lines, because it depends on the acoustic, of the energy, of the weather, of many other things. So calling that back to what it means to us and why music is so important is Bart, who just had to leave, did a wonderful exercise in this room, and you already mentioned it. He put us in 4 quadrants here, a mental one, an emotional one, the physical one, and the spiritual one. And I was one of the few ones stand fast at the emotional corner, where I feel happy and good. And others were wandering around, right, Katharina?
Yes.
You found yourself in the right place?
No, I didn't. Thank you for mentioning it.
But the interesting thing is with music that it actually connects these 4 elements which make us human. You have melody, which is extremely emotional. You have rhythm, which is very physical. You have harmonies, and if you listen to Johann Sebastian Bach or to any other harmonies, it is extremely intellectual. And if it all comes together, for me, I'm sorry to mention it again, in the music of Johann Sebastian Bach, if you listen to, I don't know, the B minor mass or so, it's extremely spiritual. So music brings all that together. And I think that's exactly where I would like to end, because we have another piece for you by a female composer, Rhonda Larson. And it's a piece which is written and called of Be Still My Soul. And I thought it's the really best piece to end that session today. So over to you, Daniela.